They say the internet is a black hole, a void where kindness goes to die, and genuine connection is a myth. For the longest time, I believed them. How could I not? My heart had been a revolving door for disappointment, a museum of shattered expectations and carefully catalogued betrayals. If you'd told me a year ago that I'd be sitting here, penning a story about finding my soulmate on Reddit, of all places, I would have laughed. A bitter, hollow laugh, probably followed by a sarcastic comment, and a swift retreat into my fortress of solitude. But life, as it turns out, has a wickedly ironic sense of humor, and an even more surprising capacity for healing. This isn't just a story about finding love. It's about finding it in the digital wilderness, after convincing myself it was an extinct species. It's about how two people, scarred and wary, navigated the anonymous corridors of the internet and stumbled into something so real, it rebuilt them, pixel by pixel, word by word, until a whisper in the wires became the symphony of our lives. My romantic history wasn't just a series of unfortunate events. It was a Shakespearean tragedy played out in modern-day dating apps and awkward coffee dates. Each act leaving me more bruised than the last. It started young, as these things often do. High school brought Liam, my first love, the boy I thought I'd build a picket fence future with. He was charming, popular, and for 2 blissful years, he was mine. Then came prom night, a night supposed to be a fairy tale, but mine ended with me finding him entwined with my then best friend Chloe in the backseat of his dad's sedan. The image is still seared into my brain. A technicolor nightmare of betrayal. The picket fence didn't just dissolve, it exploded, leaving behind shrapnel that embedded itself deep in my teenage heart. Chloe's tearful, insincere apology the next day felt like salt in an already gaping wound. College was supposed to be a fresh start. I threw myself into my studies, art history, a passion that offered solace in the timeless beauty of things that couldn't betray you. Paintings didn't lie. Sculptures didn't cheat. But the human need for connection is a stubborn, relentless vine. Enter Mark. He was older, a graduate student in philosophy, worldly and intense. He quoted Rilke, understood my obscure art references to symbolist painters, and made me feel intellectually cherished in a way Liam never had. He painted a picture of a future filled with European travels, passionate debates in dimly lit cafes, and a love that was transcendent, beyond the mundane. For 3 years I clung to that canvas. I molded myself into the woman I thought he wanted, the stoic intellectual, suppressing my own lighter, sillier side, my own desires, my own voice. The betrayal this time wasn't as blatant as a prom night indiscretion. It was a slow, insidious poisoning, a creeping erosion of my self-worth. It was the constant criticism disguised as helping me grow, the subtle gaslighting that made me question my own perceptions, my own sanity. The final blow came during what I thought was a celebratory dinner for my first curated exhibition. He casually confessed, between sips of wine, that he'd been seeing someone else, an undergraduate, someone less complicated, more lighthearted, for the past 6 months. He said it with such chilling detachment, as if discussing a particularly dull lecture. The devastation was profound. A cold, creeping numbness that settled deep in my bones, making me wonder if I was even capable of inspiring genuine affection. After Mark, I swore off relationships with the fervor of a zealot. I built walls so high and thick, even siege engines would have failed. I focused on my career, pouring all my energy into curating art for a small but respected gallery. I had good friends, a decent apartment in a lively neighborhood, and my cat, Edgar. Allan Poe, Poe for short, a creature as beautifully melancholic and prone to dramatic pronouncements as his namesake. On the surface, I was the epitome of the independent, successful woman. Strong, unflappable. But beneath the carefully constructed facade, I was achingly lonely. The kind of lonely that echoes in an empty apartment late at night. The kind that makes you hug your pillow a little tighter and wonder if your own company will always be your primary companion. My friends, bless their well-meaning hearts, staged interventions disguised as girls' nights out. "You just need to get back out there, Sarah," they'd chirp, their optimism a stark contrast to my jaded cynicism. Each disastrous blind date, each awkward encounter, only reinforced my belief that love was a cruel cosmic joke, and I was perennially the punchline. There was David, who spent the entire dinner psychoanalyzing my every word and then tried to recruit me into his pyramid scheme. There was Ben, who seemed promising until he forgot his wallet on 3 consecutive dates and then asked to borrow money for his ailing grandmother, who, I later discovered via social media, was on a cruise in the Caribbean. And then there was James, who, after a month of what I thought was a budding connection, full of shared laughter and seemingly deep conversations, ghosted me so completely I started to wonder if I'd hallucinated our entire brief relationship. Each experience added another layer of scar tissue, another heavily mortared brick to my emotional fortress. I was approaching 30, and the landscape of my heart felt barren, scorched earth where nothing, absolutely nothing could grow. The pandemic hit, and the isolation amplified everything to an unbearable degree. My gallery closed temporarily, my social life dwindled to pixelated faces on Zoom calls, and Poe, bless his furry, judgmental heart, could only offer so much conversation, mostly demands for food and chin scratches. It was during one particularly bleak Friday evening, rain lashing against my window, the silence of my apartment deafening, endlessly scrolling through the curated perfection of Instagram, feeling more inadequate and invisible than ever, that I stumbled upon Reddit. I'd heard of it, of course, but always dismissed it as a haven for trolls, incels, and niche, impenetrable communities. Curiosity, or perhaps sheer, unadulterated boredom, mixed with a desperate need for any kind of human interaction that didn't involve my own reflection, led me to create an anonymous account. My username, u/paintedlady89, felt like a small act of defiance, a nod to my love for art and the year I felt my adult life truly began, albeit under a cloud. At first, I lurked, a digital ghost haunting the fringes of conversations. I dipped my toes into various subreddits, r/art, r/books, r/askwomen, even r/cats standing up. Don't judge, it was a dark time. It was a strange new world, chaotic yet compelling, a vibrant, sprawling, anonymous city. There was a rawness, an unvarnished honesty I hadn't expected. People shared their deepest fears, their most embarrassing moments, their quiet triumphs, their existential dread, all under the cloak of anonymity. It was messy and human, a stark, refreshing contrast to the polished, performative narratives of other social media platforms. One night, drawn by a morbid curiosity I couldn't quite suppress, I found myself on r/Heartbreak. It was a masochistic urge, perhaps, to read stories that mirrored my own pain, to confirm my belief that love was a universally losing game. But instead of deepening my despair, something shifted within me. Reading post after post, comment after comment, I saw my own experiences, my own specific agonies, reflected in the words of strangers from across the globe. The same betrayals, the same crushing loneliness, the same desperate flickering hope for something more. There was a strange, unexpected comfort in that shared suffering, a sense of not being entirely alone in my emotional wreckage. It was like finding a support group I hadn't realized I desperately needed. Hesitantly, I started commenting. Tiny offerings at first. "I'm so sorry you're going through this," or "You're not alone in feeling that way." Then, small pieces of my own story began to emerge, veiled in generalities. It was cathartic. Anonymity, the very thing I'd been wary of, became a shield, allowing me to be vulnerable in a way I hadn't been in years, not even with my closest friends, who I feared burdening. I wasn't Sarah, the art curator, with a string of spectacularly failed relationships and a carefully guarded heart. I was just u/paintedlady89, another voice in the digital chorus of the heartbroken, offering and receiving solace in equal measure. It was on a thread in a completely different subreddit, Our Cozy Places, that I first encountered him. The internet, in its infinite randomness, decided to throw me a lifeline when I least expected it. Someone had posted a picture of a stunningly beautiful, cluttered home library, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves overflowing with volumes, sunlight streaming through a bay window illuminating dust motes dancing in the air, a ginger cat asleep on a worn leather armchair. It was the kind of room I dreamed of, a sanctuary. I commented almost without thinking, "This is my version of heaven. I could get lost in there for years, possibly emerging only for tea and more books." I logged off, not expecting anything. It was just another fleeting comment in the digital ether. The next afternoon, a little red notification icon appeared. A reply to my comment. It was from a user named u/stargazertom, u/paintedlady89. Same here. Though my cat, a black void named Nebula, would probably try to help re-alphabetize everything by strategically knocking books off the shelves. Worth it, though, especially if there's tea involved. His comment was simple, lighthearted, but it made me smile. A genuine, unforced smile, the kind that had become a rarity. There was something in the specificity, a black void named Nebula, that charmed me. I clicked on his profile, a habit I'd developed. He didn't have much post history, mostly thoughtful comments in R books, R science fiction, a genre I secretly adored but rarely admitted to, and surprisingly, R baking. He'd posted a picture once of a slightly lopsided, but clearly lovingly made sourdough loaf, captioned, "Attempt number 7, getting there. Tastes better than it looks, promise?" It was endearing in its imperfection. We exchanged a few more comments on that thread, discussing our favorite cozy reading spots, the delightful tyranny of house pets, and the best kind of tea for a long reading session. He was a staunch Earl Grey man, I, a devotee of Darjeeling. It was easy, unforced. There were no ulterior motives, no pressure, just two anonymous people sharing a fleeting moment of connection over a shared appreciation for comfy chairs, good books, and opinionated felines. For a moment, I forgot about the walls around my heart. A few days later, feeling particularly adrift, I posted a query in r Ask Reddit. What's a small, seemingly insignificant thing that brings you immense joy, the kind that cuts through the noise? I was searching for little pockets of light, reminders that beauty still existed. I got hundreds of replies. The smell of rain on hot asphalt, finding a forgotten $20 bill in an old coat pocket, the first sip of perfectly brewed coffee in the morning, a dog wagging its entire body in greeting. And then there was one from u/stargazertom, the sound of a page turning in a completely silent room. And on a more professional note, when my code finally compiles without errors after hours of banging my head against the metaphorical keyboard. I laughed out loud, startling Poe from his nap. The second part was specific, a little nerdy, and utterly charming. It painted a picture. I replied, "The page turning, absolutely. It's like a tiny, satisfying sigh. The code compiling, I'll take your word for it. What kind of code tortures you so, and does it ever apologize?" That reply, intended as a lighthearted quip, led to a direct message. It's usually Python or JavaScript, and no, it never apologizes, the stubborn thing, he wrote. Just sits there smugly once it works. I'm Tom, by the way. My breath hitched. A name. This felt different. "Sarah," I typed back, my fingers trembling slightly. "And I commiserate with your struggle against inanimate, smug objects." Our DMs became a regular thing, a quiet undercurrent to my days. We talked about everything and nothing. Books we were reading, he recommended a sci-fi series I devoured in a week, movies we loved, we discovered a shared passion for Studio Ghibli, the absurdities of pandemic life, our dreams for the future, however hazy they seemed. He had a dry, self-deprecating wit that meshed perfectly with my sarcasm. He was intelligent, but unpretentious, kind without being cloying. He never asked for pictures, never pushed for personal details I wasn't ready to share. He just listened and shared. He told me about his attempts to learn the ukulele, badly he insisted, his love for hiking in the nearby national park, the satisfaction of fixing a leaky faucet. Mundane things, perhaps, but they painted a picture of a life, a person. Slowly, tentatively, like two cautious creatures emerging from hibernation, we started to peel back the layers of our anonymity. He told me he was a software developer, working from home long before the pandemic made it mainstream. I told him about my work at the gallery, my passion for impressionist art, for the fleeting beauty they captured. He told me his username came from a childhood love of astronomy, a sense of wonder at the vastness of the universe that he still carried. I confessed that you/Painted Lady 89 was a nod to the butterflies I found beautiful, and the year I felt my world had tilted. Each revelation was a small leap of faith, a carefully offered piece of ourselves, met with gentle acceptance and thoughtful reciprocity on the other side. There was a moment, about a month into our DMs, when I almost retreated. An old insecurity flared up, Mark's voice in my head whispering that I was too intense, too much. I'd shared a particularly passionate rant about a badly curated museum exhibit I'd seen online, and then immediately regretted it, convinced I'd scared him off. I didn't reply to his last message for 2 days, my anxiety coiling in my stomach. Then, a new message from him. Hey, Sarah, everything okay? Just checking in. No pressure to reply if you're busy, but I enjoyed your museum rant. You should see the user interface I'm currently battling. Talk about poor design. His understanding, his lack of judgment, disarmed me completely. That was a turning point. One evening, after a particularly long exchange, where I'd confessed some of my past relationship traumas, vaguely at first, then with more raw detail as his empathetic, non-judgmental responses made me feel unexpectedly safe, he shared his own. Tom's story wasn't identical to mine, but the echoes were chillingly familiar. He'd been in a long-term relationship with a woman named Jessica, someone he'd planned to marry. They'd built a life together, bought a small house with a yard for the dog they planned to get. Then, he discovered she'd been leading a double life, racking up huge credit card debts in his name and having an affair with one of their mutual friends. The betrayal had been swift and brutal, shattering his trust in others and in his own judgment, leaving him cynical and deeply wary, much like me. I pretty much gave up on the whole love thing after Jessica, he typed, the words stark on my screen. Figured I was better off alone. Less collateral damage, you know? My friends tried, but every attempt to date felt like walking through a minefield. I know that feeling more than I can say, I replied, my fingers hovering over the keyboard, a lump in my throat. It's like, why risk that level of pain again, right? Easier to just build a really good fortress and stock it with books and cats. Exactly, he wrote. My fortress has excellent Wi-Fi and a decent coffee machine. But then, talking to you, it doesn't feel like a risk. It just feels nice, like finding a comfortable, well-lit room in a very dark house. My heart did a little flutter kick, a dangerous, unfamiliar sensation. It was hope, tentative and fragile, a tiny green shoot pushing through concrete. I'd stamped it out so many times before, but with Tom, it felt different. There was a foundation of shared understanding, of mutual respect, built in the quiet, unassuming space of our Reddit DMs, a space free of societal pressures and preconceived notions. Our conversations deepened, migrating from text to voice calls. Hearing his voice for the first time was strangely intimate and surprisingly nerve-wracking. It was warm, a slight baritone with a laugh that crinkled at the edges, just as I'd imagined. Our calls would last for hours, stretching late into the night, long after Poe had curled up on my lap and fallen asleep. We talked about our dreams, his to one day hike a significant portion of the Appalachian Trail, mine to open a small, independent gallery that championed local emerging artists. We shared our fears. His of failing to live up to his own expectations. Mine of never truly letting anyone close again. We debated the merits of pineapple on pizza. He was for, I was vehemently against, leading to a surprisingly passionate and hilarious argument. He learned about my slightly obsessive cataloging of my art books. I learned about his equally obsessive organization of his comic book collection. The idea of meeting in person began to surface, a terrifying, exhilarating prospect that hung in the air between us. We'd been talking for nearly 6 months. We'd shared more with each other, our vulnerabilities, our quirks, our secret shames, than we had with most people in our real lives. But the internet is one thing, reality, with its awkward silences and unpredictable variables, is another. What if the easy chemistry we had through screens didn't translate? What if we were just two lonely people projecting our hopes and ideals onto anonymous avatars? What if one of us had a really annoying laugh in person? The fear was immense, a cold dread that settled in my stomach. My past experiences screamed at me to run, to protect myself, to retreat to the safety of my fortress. Liam's betrayal, Mark's casual cruelty, the ghosts of a dozen disastrous dates, they all whispered insidious warnings. But then there was Tom's voice, his steady kindness, the way he got me, even the broken, cynical parts I tried to hide. He didn't just tolerate my baggage, he helped me unpack some of it, carefully, gently. "I'm scared," I confessed to him one night during a call, my voice barely a whisper. Terrified, actually. What if this is all just in our heads? What if we meet and it's horribly awkward? Or worse, what if one of us is a massive disappointment to the other? I pictured him seeing me, and his face falling, the polite but strained conversation, the hasty retreat. There was a pause on the other end of the line, a silence that stretched for a beat too long, making my heart pound. Then he said softly, his voice laced with an earnestness that made my eyes prickle, "Sarah, what if it's wonderful? What if it's everything we've been tentatively hoping for, and maybe even more? Isn't that possibility, however slim we might fear it is, worth facing the fear?" I'm scared too, you know. I haven't done this being meeting someone I actually care about, in a very long time. But the thought of not meeting you, of letting this connection just fade into a what if, scares me more. He was right. The potential reward, the chance at something real, something that felt like it was already mending parts of me I thought were irreparable, outweighed the familiar, cold comfort of my self-imposed isolation. We decided to meet. A neutral location, a small, charming town halfway between our respective cities. A public place, a little independent cafe called The Daily Grind, renowned for its artisanal coffee and even better homemade scones. I spent the entire week leading up to it in a state of heightened anxiety. I agonized over what to wear, changing my outfit at least 10 times. I replayed our conversations in my head, analyzing every word, my anxiety warring with a tentative, fluttering excitement that felt like a flock of butterflies had taken up residence in my stomach. What if he wasn't who he seemed? What if I wasn't who he imagined? The what-ifs were relentless, a chorus of doubt. My friend Jess, to whom I'd finally confessed the whole Reddit saga, was cautiously optimistic, but also made me promise to share my location and have a check-in call. The day arrived, a crisp, bright autumn Saturday. The 2-hour drive felt like an eternity. My palms were sweating so much I had to keep wiping them on my jeans. My stomach was a tight knot of nerves. I almost turned back a dozen times, convincing myself this was a terrible, foolish idea. What was I thinking, meeting a stranger from the internet? But then I'd remember his laugh, the way he understood my obscure art jokes, the kindness in his voice when I'd been low. When I finally pulled into the parking lot of The Daily Grind, my heart hammering against my ribs, I saw him standing near the entrance, looking just as endearingly nervous as I felt. He'd sent me a casual selfie a few weeks prior, after much mutual coaxing, so I knew what he looked like. Dark, slightly unruly hair, glasses, a kind smile. But seeing him in person, in 3 dimensions, was different. He was taller than I expected, with kind eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled. A real, slightly anxious, utterly disarming smile. He was wearing a simple blue sweater, well-worn jeans, and was clutching a battered copy of Neil Gaiman's Stardust. It was so Tom. So perfectly, wonderfully Tom. He saw my car and his smile widened, a wave of palpable relief washing over his face. I took a deep, shaky breath, gave myself a mental pep talk, and got out of the car. "Sarah?" he asked, his voice exactly as I remembered from our calls. Only now it wasn't coming through a speaker. It was real, and it made my knees feel a little weak. "Tom?" I replied, my own voice a little shaky, a hopeful tremor in it. There was a moment, just a beat, where we stood there, two strangers who knew each other's souls more intimately than many lifelong acquaintances, finally occupying the same physical space. The air crackled with a mixture of anticipation and sheer, unadulterated terror. And then he did something that melted away months of accumulated anxiety and fear. He didn't lunge for a hug, didn't offer a formal handshake. He just reached out, slowly and gently took my hand. His was warm, strong, a little calloused from his woodworking. It fit perfectly in mine. "It's really, really good to finally meet you, Sarah," he said, his eyes sincere, a touch of wonder in them. "You too, Tom," I managed, a genuine wide smile finally breaking through my wall of nerves. "You're taller than I pictured." He chuckled, a warm, rumbling sound. "You're exactly as I pictured, though your avatar didn't do your smile justice. The awkwardness I dreaded, the kind that makes you want the ground to swallow you whole, never materialized. Sitting in that bustling cafe, the aroma of coffee and baked goods enveloping us, talking felt as natural, as effortless as our late-night calls. We talked for hours, about everything, about nothing. We laughed, a lot. He made terrible puns, and I groaned theatrically, but secretly loved them. He listened intently, his gaze never wavering, when I talked about Nichole Stourier, sir. Just, I was excited about, asking thoughtful, insightful questions. I found myself utterly fascinated as he explained the complex logic of a coding problem he'd recently solved, even though I understood maybe half of it. His passion was infectious, his enthusiasm genuine. It wasn't just what we said. It was the comfortable silences between words, the easy laughter, the feeling of being utterly, completely myself, with another person for the first time in what felt like a lifetime. There was no pretense, no performance, just us. There were no grand declarations, no movie moment kiss in the rain, though it did start to drizzle as we left the cafe, which felt appropriately cinematic. It was simpler than that, quieter, and far more profound. It was the small things, the way he'd unconsciously mirror my gestures, the way his eyes lit up when he talked about his latest project, the way he made sure my coffee cup was never empty. As the afternoon wore on, and the cafe owner started politely stacking chairs and pointedly wiping down nearby tables, a sense of melancholy settled over me. I didn't want it to end. This bubble of unexpected joy felt too fragile. "So," Tom said as we stood outside, the cool autumn air carrying the scent of rain and damp leaves. He shuffled his feet a little, looking down then back up at me. "This wasn't a complete and utter disaster, then?" I laughed, a real, unrestrained laugh. "No, definitely not a disaster. Actually," I admitted, feeling a surge of boldness I hadn't felt in years, "it was kind of amazing. Surprisingly, breathtakingly amazing." His smile was radiant, chasing away the gray of the afternoon. "I agree. Amazing." He hesitated for a moment, then took a visible breath. "I know this is fast, and possibly certifiably crazy, but I don't suppose you'd be free for dinner next weekend. My city this time, my treat. And I promise my sourdough, while still aesthetically challenged, is even better in person. I'll even bake a fresh loaf." My heart soared, doing a series of acrobatic flips. "I'd love that," I said, meaning it more than I'd meant anything in a long, long time. "But I'm paying for my own dinner, and I expect a full report on the sourdough's structural integrity." That first date led to a second, and a third, and soon we lost count. We took turns making the drive. the hours in the car filled with anticipation and curated playlists. We explored each other's cities, discovered hidden gems, and slowly, carefully, began to weave our lives together. He met my friends, who, after initial and understandable skepticism about our "we met on Reddit" in a thread about cozy libraries origin story, universally adored him for his quiet humor and genuine kindness. Jess even gave him her official stamp of approval, which was high praise indeed. Poe, my discerning feline overlord, after a week of suspicious glares and strategic ankle-biting attempts, eventually deigned to let Tom pet him without hissing, even purring once or twice. I took this as a very, very good sign. It wasn't all smooth sailing, of course. We were two people who had been deeply hurt, and we carried our baggage, sometimes tripping over it. There were moments of insecurity, flickers of old fears that threatened to douse our fledgling flame. I'd sometimes find myself pulling back, terrified that this, too, would end in pain, that I was setting myself up for another devastating fall. He had his own moments of doubt, his own walls that occasionally, reflexively, went up. There was one evening, a few months in, when a careless comment from a mutual acquaintance about his ex, Jessica, sent him into a spiral of silence. My old anxieties surged. Was he regretting this? Was I not enough? But instead of retreating into my own fear, as I would have done in the past, I remembered the honesty we'd forged in our DMs. I gave him space, and then, gently, I asked. He opened up, shared his lingering pain, his fear of history repeating itself, and I listened. And I understood. And he did the same for me when my own ghosts whispered their doubts. The difference was, we talked about it. We were honest, brutally so at times, about our fears and insecurities. We'd learned, through our anonymous Reddit beginnings, the profound, transformative power of vulnerable communication. We were learning to navigate the storms together, not just weather them alone. One evening, many months into our relationship, we were curled up on my sofa, which was rapidly becoming our sofa. We were watching some terrible, low-budget sci-fi movie he loved, the kind with questionable special effects and even more questionable dialogue. I was nestled against him, his arm around me, Poe purring contentedly on my lap, a furry, vibrating hot water bottle. A wave of such profound peace, such quiet contentment, washed over me, it almost brought tears to my eyes. It was a feeling I hadn't realized I'd been starving for. "What is it?" Tom asked, his voice soft against my hair, noticing my quietness. I looked up at him, at his kind face, the genuine concern in his eyes, the way the lamplight caught the silver flecks in his dark hair. I never thought I'd feel this happy again," I whispered, the admission raw and true. "Or this safe. I'd forgotten what it felt like." He tightened his arm around me, pressing a gentle kiss to my temple. "Me neither," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion. "For a long time, I thought my heart was permanently out of order, a broken machine. Turns out, it just needed the right technician, someone who knew how to read the schematics." I swatted his arm playfully, a tear escaping and tracing a path down my cheek. "A software developer, and now a heart technician? Is there anything you can't do?" He grinned, wiping the tear away with his thumb. "Well, I still can't bake a perfectly symmetrical loaf of bread, and my ukulele playing still scares Nebula, but I'm working on it. For you." And that's the thing about Tom. He's not a fairy tale prince who rode in on a white charger. He's real. He's flawed. He leaves his socks on the floor sometimes, and he hums slightly off-key when he's concentrating deeply on his code. He still sometimes forgets to replace the milk carton in the fridge. But he's also the kindest, most patient, incredibly smart, and fiercely loyal man I've ever known. He sees me, all of me, the strong, independent curator, the vulnerable, scarred woman, the art nerd, the slightly cynical romantic. And he loves me anyway, or maybe because of it all. He doesn't try to fix me, he just holds my hand while I continue to fix myself, and he celebrates every small victory. He's my partner, my confidant, my best friend. It's been 2 years since that first tentative DM on our cozy places, 2 years since you Stargazer Tom and you Painted Lady 89 decided to take a chance. We moved in together 6 months ago, into a sun-filled apartment that's a beautiful, happy mess of my art books and his tech gadgets, my overflowing paint supplies and his woodworking tools. We have 2 cats now, Poe, who has grudgingly accepted his role as elder statesman, and Pixel, the little ginger terror Tom rescued from a shelter, who believes Tom's keyboard is her personal heated napping spot. Our home library is taking shape, slowly but surely, filled with books we've both loved for years and new ones we discover together, our literary tastes merging and expanding. It's our sanctuary, our cozy place, built not just with shelves and books, but with shared dreams and quiet understanding. Sometimes when I look at him across the dinner table as he recounts some ridiculous bug he spent all day chasing, or when I wake up next to him in the morning, his arm slung protectively around me, I still can't quite believe it. That this incredible man, this deep and abiding love, found its genesis in the anonymous, often chaotic, sometimes bewildering world of Reddit. It's a testament, I think, to the fact that genuine connection can blossom in the most unexpected of gardens, that kindness and understanding can be found in the digital ether, that even after a lifetime of heartbreak, the heart can relearn how to trust, how to open, how to love again, fiercely and without reservation. Our story isn't a grand, sweeping epic destined for the silver screen. It's quiet, built on a foundation of shared laughter, late-night talks that stretched into dawn, mutual respect, and the extraordinary courage it took for 2 broken people to take a chance on a stranger from the internet. It's a story of resilience, of finding a second chance when we'd both all but given up looking. And it's a reminder, to myself as much as to anyone else, that sometimes the most profound, life-altering connections are waiting just a click away, in the unlikeliest of subreddits, ready to prove that true love isn't a myth or a privilege reserved for the lucky few. It's real. It's possible, even for the battle-scarred and the broken-hearted. We are proof. We are the Reddit couple who found our happily ever after, not in a fairy tale, but in the wonderfully messy, perfectly imperfect reality of modern love. And I wouldn't have it any other way. My DMs are, perhaps ironically, always open, not for dating advice. I think I'm happily, permanently retired from that particular game. But if you ever need to be reminded that hope is a stubborn, beautiful, and surprisingly resilient thing, sometimes it just needs a little anonymous encouragement to bloom.